Hey, I'm going to read you another chapter of In Grandma's Attic. I hope you will enjoy it. It's called The New Pump. Be careful, said Grandma. That's hot. But I had already taken a swallow of the cocoa, and now I knew it was hot. It burnt my tongue and all the way down. I just want to say that cocoa is what we used to call hot chocolate. We'd call it cocoa. That's too bad, said Grandma. I know how that feels. I've burned my tongue many times. Did you know that something doesn't have to be hot to burn your tongue? You can't burn it on something cold, I said, still rubbing at the tears that had come to my eyes. Oh my, Grandma replied, you surely can, and much worse than you've just burned yourself too. I know, because I did it once. I was quite often a foolish little girl, said Grandma. If someone told me not to do something, that was exactly what I wanted to do. Most of the time, I had to pay dearly for it. But this time, I learned a lesson I didn't forget for a long time. It was in the fall that Pa had gotten a new pump. We had drawn the water from a well before, and the pump was a wonderful thing. You just had to move the handle up and down, and the water came gushing out. We all felt quite privileged to have such a wonderful thing in our own yard. The boys didn't fuss about whose turn it was to get water for Ma, and they could fill the horse trough in just a few minutes. The whole family enjoyed that pump. The weather had gotten cold early that year, and we had frost most every night in October. By November, the snow was falling, and the boys needed mittens on when they went to get water in the morning. The well was deep, so the water didn't freeze in the winter. Sometimes the pump would be frozen, though, and they would have to bring hot water from the kitchen to pour in and thaw it. Even that extra work didn't take away the enjoyment we children had in that new pump. One evening, our neighbor, Mr. Hobbs, stopped by to visit. He and Pa sat in the kitchen talking about the crops and the cold weather. I was helping Ma with the dishes. I was always anxious to enter into the conversation, but since I didn't know much about crops, there seemed to be nothing for me to say. However, during a lull in the talking, I thought of something I did know about. Mr. Hobbs, I said, did you know we have a new pump? No, said Mr. Hobbs. Do you really now? I suppose you bring in all the water for your Ma and water the animals too, don't you? I knew Mr. Hobbs was just teasing. The handle was too heavy for me to move fast enough to get the water started. The boys had let me help them pump sometimes when they were in a good mood, but I laughed along with Mr. Hobbs and Pa. A few minutes later, Mr. Hobbs rose to leave. As he opened the door, he turned to me and said with a laugh, Well, Mabel, don't put your tongue on the pump handle. Then he and Pa went out into the yard. That seemed a strange thing to say. Why would I want to do that? I concluded that Mr. Hobbs was teasing again and thought no more about it. Several days later, I came out of the house to find everything covered with new snow. I could see my breath in the frosty air, and there were little thin pieces of ice around the edges of the horse trough. I gave the pump handle a few pulls to see if I might be able to get some water, but of course, nothing happened. The handle was white with frost, and as I stood looking at it, I remembered Mr. Hobbs's remark. Since he was only fooling, there was no reason why I shouldn't lick the frost off the handle if I wanted to. So I bent over and put my tongue on the pump handle. I knew right away that Mr. Hobbs hadn't been fooling. My tongue was stuck fast. It's not very easy to holler without moving your tongue. But I could still cry, and I began to do so. Big tears ran down my cheeks and dripped on the pump handle. Fortunately, Reuben was coming from the barn and saw me. "Mabel, what in the world are you doing?" he asked. Then he saw the predicament I was in. "Wait here," he said. "I'll go get Ma." Of course, there was nothing I could do except wait right there. But it was comforting to know that help was on the way. "Ma," Reuben called, "Mabel has her tongue stuck on the pump handle." Ma came running out to look. "Don't pull on it, Mabel," she said. "Just stay right here and I'll get some warm water." I was getting a little tired of being told to stay right there when they all knew I couldn't possibly move. But I nodded my head the best I could. Ma was soon back with a dipper of warm water. "Now this will hurt," she said, "but it's the only way to get your tongue loose." My, what a silly thing for you to do. Didn't you know that anything wet sticks to cold metal? I hadn't known, but I did now. The warm water loosened my tongue, but some of the skin came off too. I'll tell you, I had a sore tongue for a long time. The new pump didn't seem quite as enchanting to me for a while. I begged Pa not to tell Mr. Hobbs what I had done, and he promised me that no one would hear about it. Ma warned the boys not to tease me. She figured I had suffered enough for my foolishness. Grandma shook her head at the memory. "We all have to learn some way," she said. "But I'm sure there's a better way than that." Oh, sorry, I lost my way here. "But I'm sure there's a better way than that to do it. Sometimes we act the same way with God. He tells us not to do things, but we try them anyway. By the time we're sorry about it, we've been hurt and feel just a little foolish." I slowly finished my cocoa while I thought about Grandma's story.